Hello everyone. So this is the 11th week when we are interacting for the course on advanced robotics. My name is Soumya and I am PMRF fellow at IIT Gandhinagar. So yeah, it has been 10 weeks already and we have learned a lot of things from this course. But last time when we were learning more on, control was already done. It was just that before that we had done Lyapunov controller and then we went to a basic PID controller. But after that, last week when we were dealing with force controlled in constraint tasks, so we learned that force and velocity cannot be applied in the same direction simultaneously, right? We learned, and there can be natural constraints, there can be artificial constraints. So all of them we had seen. Now, today's concept, which is mostly going to be a major part of it, is going to be multi finger robot hands. Basically, the concept of grasping. So, in this case, we are going to utilize the same principle that force and velocity cannot be applied in the same direction simultaneously. Hence, you already have twists when you are not maintaining the contact with the object. But if you maintain some contact with the object, due to constraints, your twists do not remain as they are and you get wrenches, right? Where you get all the force and moment terms. Whereas if it were just twist, it would have been linear and angular velocity, right? So yeah, no. So taking the same concept that we had in the last class, we'll be proceeding forward. After this grasping, we'll move to gates. So in gates, basically, the syllabus deals with quadrupeds and bipeds. So we'll be seeing them only. We won't be going to hexapods and tripods or any other form of gates, sorry, not gates, any other form of robot that has different number of legs. So we'll be seeing all of these. Then we have gates, which is basically the sequence in which the limbs are moving. Yeah, so these are the things. And then okay, then we can move today, we can go on today with the lecture. So, yeah, let's start with the very first question. It is the easiest question of all. Okay. So, okay. So, the question is the analysis of multi finger grasping and manipulation based on screw theory considers the following at the fingertips. So, if you've gone through the lecture, I think you would remember what it is, but yeah. So, multi-finger grasping analysis, which essentially is like if you have an object and let's say this is your finger, you're holding it using your two hands and you're applying a force over here, then or if it is going to be a screw theory in which this is your wall and then you have a screw over here, you place in the screwdriver here and then you try to push it into the wall. Okay, so in both of these actually are based on the same theory, and when you analyze them, we need to see that what do they consider at the fingertips. Is it the friction? Is it twist and wrenches? Is it forces, or it is moments? Okay. Okay, so any guesses on the answer? No one? Okay, if
No,
not,
madam.
okay. So, okay, let's move forward. So yeah, I'll start right from the screw theory. So in screw theory, robotic motion and force interactions both are described using something. I'll tell you. Are described using twists and wrenches. So this twist mainly deals with linear velocity and angular velocity. Okay, these wrenches deal with uh, what forces and moments. Okay, so basically Vx, Vy, Vz, omega x, omega y, omega z, and in this case of forces and moments, it is fx, fy, fz, mx, my, mz. Okay, so these are the 12 things basically. So when you are dealing with moments can be called torques, right? Yeah, basically the torques. So in this multi-finger grasping, these wrenches are used to model how each fingertip contributes to force and torque, and twists basically describe what is the allowable motion. So I'll write it. I request you to make notes of all of these because these are something extra also that we are talking.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so the first thing is uh, yeah, first thing is wrenches. So these wrenches are used to model how each contributes to forces and torques. And twists actually describe allowable motion. Okay, that if you'll be able to move in the particular direction, on for example, if there is a wall here, you can apply a force on it in this direction. Let's say it is x direction, but you cannot move forward. It is the natural constraint. That is why you can have a wrench here, but you cannot have twist at the same time. Okay, so that is why these wrenches are used to model how each fingertip, how these fingertips basically contributes to force and torque, and twist basically describe what is the allowable motion that we have. So screw theory unifies them for elegant analysis of manipulation and grasp this stability. So we have to deal with two things very important. One is manipulation and another is grasping. If we want to do both of these things simultaneously, the screw theory is basically a good blend of both of them. So there are other options also. This friction. So friction is an important thing in grasping, but is not the main focus of screw theory analysis, right? It is handled in contact models like column friction, not the screw theory. The other option is force. Forces actually do not capture any rotational effect. Screw theory uses wrenches, which includes both force and moments in a 6D vector, as we saw here. So this is also not the correct option. The last option is moments. Again, moments are a part of wrenches. Focusing only on moments ignores the full force torque interaction, which is essential in screw based analysis. Okay, that is why the correct option that we have here is twist and wrenches. Okay, I hope this is conceptually clear. If it is, then let's move to the next one. Let me increase the brightness. In case of a fingertip, let's say this is your object and you have a finger placed over here and this is making contact here. In case of a fingertip having point contact without friction, how many twists and wrenches act respectively?
5 and 1, madam.
Right. The correct answer is 5 and 1. And how do we go about it? It's like a point. So it's talking about a point without friction. So a point without friction, that means if this is your application of force, you don't have friction in any of the directions, neither in this direction nor in x direction, which could be, let's say, going into the plane, and then we can have y axis. So yeah, this gives it with this idea. This is your y, this is your x, this is your z. Let's say you don't have friction in any of these directions. Okay, so if you don't have friction in any of these directions, this we won't consider because we are anyway going to apply the force in the direction. So it allows only one force, this force. You can't move in any of these directions because you don't have friction. If you don't have friction, you won't be able to move in any of the directions. You'll be able to apply the force at the same time. For moving in any direction, you need friction. So a point force without friction allows only one force. This thing basically allows only one force, which is the normal force. Okay, that can be transmitted, which means only one wrench is possible. No twist is possible because you cannot move in x, y, and z directions. You cannot have velocity, you cannot have the angular velocities, but you can have the force acting in that direction. So no torque, moment, or tangential forces can be applied due to lack of friction. Just this one wrench is possible, which is along this direction, Fx. So since there are 6 possible degrees of freedom for a rigid body and one force constraint, that leaves 5 allowable motion directions, which is 5 twists and 1 wrench. Okay, so there are 5 twists, which is allowed motion, and then we have 1 wrench. I'll go into detail again, but let's force. Okay, 1 and 5 is not correct because 5 and 1 are correct, right? 4 and 1 are not correct because 4 actually underestimates the allowable motions, right? That is why. And 3 is also not correct because this is the case for point contact with friction. So this is the case for point contact with friction. Okay, with friction you can get 3 wrenches, normal and 1 normal and 2 tangential, and 3 constrained motions. I'll get more clear on this. So from here you get with friction you get 3 wrenches, 1 normal, and there are 2 tangential, okay, and 3 constrained motions, which is 3 twists. Okay, before that, let's get more deeper into 5 twists and 1 wrench. So at a contact, let's say this is your contact, the fingertip can push but not pull. Thus it is only compressive force. No friction means no tangential force or torque can be applied, right? So no force or torque is possible in these directions. Okay, so the only wrench that can be transmitted is the normal force at this point. Okay, so a wrench in screw theory is basically a 6D vector that comprises of fx, fy, fz, and then torque x, torque y, and torque z. In this case, it would be 0, 0, 0, not 0, sorry, fz 0, 0, 0. Okay, so this represents a pure force in the normal direction. All right, now let's move to twists. Why there are 5 twists? Okay, so what are the possible 5 twists? Okay, since the wrench restricts motion only along the z axis, 5 motions remain unconstrained. And what are those 5 allowable twists? These are translation along x-axis, translation along y-axis, okay, rotation about x-axis, y-axis, z-axis, right? So these are the allowable twists. Okay, so these correspond to 5 twist vectors. Now how they can be represented? The first one can be represented as 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. I think we have 6 here. The second one can be 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. Third can be 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0. Fourth can be 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. Fifth can be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. Right? So this is your X translation. This is your Y translation. This is your roll, which is rotation about the X. This is your pitch, which is rotation about Y. And this is yaw, which is rotation about Z. Okay, the only not allowed twist is translation along the z-axis, because the contact here applies a force to resist motion in that direction. Okay, hence there is a normal force, and then there are 5 allowable twists, which are the following. I hope this question is clear.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine, let's move to the next question. When an object is grasped by a multi-finger robot hand and it is in force enclosure, what does that mean? It cannot reject any disturbances. It can reject a subset of all disturbances. It can reject all disturbances, may or may not reject a disturbance. Okay, so we'll be talking about force enclosure. So, okay, fine. So what does force enclosure mean? The first thing that we need to answer. So this is basically the set of contact forces the set of contact forces that can be applied by the fingers. Okay, by the fingers, so that is holding an object. That yeah, what they can do, they can counteract any external wrench. What is wrench? These force plus torque, okay, applied to the object. So, uh, so this is the standard that we need for secured grasping. So let's say if a grasp achieves force closure, the object cannot be disturbed by any external force or torque, no matter the direction or magnitude within the limits of contact forces, whatever it is. Okay, so the set of contact forces that can be applied by the fingers, that we can apply to the object by the fingers, it can counteract any external wrench acting on the object. Okay, so the grasp is really secured here, and the object, you won't be able to disturb the object by any external force or torque. It can be secured firmly. But the answer here is going to be a subset. I'll tell you why, but let's understand this first. So yeah, so it is basically the contact uh, forces can span the entire wrench space. Let's see more on detail about it. Okay, so yeah, a grasp has a force enclosure. If the contact forces from the fingers, all the contact forces from the fingers can be combined to resist any. So let's say if this is your, let's say, what is the minimum number of fingers that we need to hold this object?
2, madam.
Yeah. So whatever, however less is the weight of the object, you need to hold it by at least 2 fingers. It is mandatory. Now, after this grasping, if you apply a force in this direction, it would snap out. So there is a certain number of wrenches that should be applied so that the object remains as a part of secure grasp, and there is no, and any external disturbance cannot take it out of it or out of the place it is supposed to. So that means that object can hold the object, the robot can hold the object firmly regardless of what wrench is applied to it, what force or torque is applied to it. So you know that the branches are the forces and the torques. So each contact can only apply one or more wrenches depending on friction or contact model, if it is having friction or it is not having any models. So then we have a concept called convex hull of wrenches. I'll not go deep into that, but it only says that the origin inside the convex hull of all the wrenches in middle. That means that we can combine the contact forces to create any net wrench to cancel the external disturbance. So if there is a disturbance being applied from this side, we can have have multiple forces that can be used to cancel out this disturbance. That's all about it. So yeah, and if you want to have problems on this, we go into linear programming to check if the origin lies in the convex hull or not. If it does lie, then we say that yeah, it is a force enclosure. Okay, so we do that way. But yeah, we'll not go deep into that. But one thing is that in 3D we always want to have the rank of this grasp matrix to be 6, to ensure that it is under complete force enclosure. That means you want to resist any disturbance, any external disturbance coming from inside. So the rank has to be maintained 6. Similarly, in 2D case, it is going to be 3. So we are going to see the 2D example using MATLAB. That is coming in some time. Okay. Then the other thing is, yeah, but so it should be able to reject all disturbances. So this should be the correct answer, right? But yeah, when I was checking what is the answer to this question, then I found that no, they have not given this to be the correct answer. They say can reject a subset of all disturbances. So actually this happens when we are talking about ideal force closure. Okay, with sufficient friction and ideal actuation. But okay, let's repeat. Force closure means what? All the contact forces can be combined to generate any arbitrary wrench. to resist any disturbance. तो कभी disturbance 5 न्यूटन का है, कभी disturbance 10 न्यूटन का है. Every time the combination of the forces that I am applying on the object should be able to change in such a way that a net effect actually balances all of them, and we are able to reject any external disturbances coming. So scree theory and grasp analysis say that yeah, it can do this. But when we come to a practical and non-ideal interpretation, what we see that we have friction limits, right? Then we also see that these contacts may be non-isotropic. What that means? That they might be directionally limited. Okay, I mean, you cannot have it in all the directions whichever you want. And then the fingers may have limited force capabilities. Okay, so even if a grasp is in force closure, theoretically, in practice it might not be able to resist very large or very fast disturbances. It may only resist some of them within limits. So that is why uh, if there are some geometric constraints or there are some other limits on forces that we are applying, this can create a problem. So uh, yeah, the only subset of disturbances would be rejectable in that case. Okay, but it is not the ideal case. Okay, so yeah, so if I ask you, can force closure or can the object that we are holding, can it resist a disturbance within a feasible range of actuators and within friction limits? If yes, then we say that it can reject all of the disturbances. But what if we go beyond the limits? Then that becomes an non-ideal case. That is why this is the correct answer. That's all. So only a subset of disturbances can be resisted due to friction, limits, and actuation. This is the practical context. Okay.
Ma'am, I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Ma'am, if the options are like it can reject a subset of all disturbance ranges, or it can reject a subset of all disturbance twist, it can reject all disturbance twist and ranges, and it can reject all disturbance twist. So the options are confusing.
It should be wrenches only because we are one was wrench, one was twist, and the two were what?
It can reject all disturbance twist and ranges.
Okay.
Then it can reject a subset of all disturbance ranges.
Okay.
So whether it could be, it can reject all disturbance twist and ranges. Will it be possible?
For wrenches, it is definite. Subset is also definite.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
let me think on this. Just wait. Actually, what we say is contact force can span the entire wrench space, no? So it should be related to wrench only, but yeah, just give me a few minutes. I'll try to check the answer.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Actually, form closure will help you do that. The question that you're asking. Force closure won't. So force closure can only reject all external wrenches. That is what I am seeing here. And yeah, so a grasp has force and closure if the contact force can arbitrarily balance any external wrench, right? Not external twist. We don't say that. So for twist, it cannot do. So thus it can just do for external disturbance wrench. Form closure will be able to do that also. So the next question that we have here is for form closure, and it would be able to do for twist and wrench both. But force closure cannot do for twist. So your correct answer is cannot is a subset of, or what was the question? Yeah, can reject a subset of all external wrenches.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Let me bring the question back. Okay, now we are going into form closure. So yeah, a grasp is said to be in form closure if it can, may or may not reject any disturbance wrenches, reject some disturbance wrenches, cannot reject any arbitrary disturbance, reject all arbitrary disturbance wrenches. Okay, so in this case, so this form closure is achieved by geometry, purely by geometry. Okay, so there is no need of friction over here. First thing, object is completely immobilized by the arrangement of contacts. Okay, so any small motion would cause uh, like it won't be able to move at all. Okay, so this grasp can resist any possible disturbance purely due to how the object is trapped. It can reject all disturbance wrenches geometrically. Okay, so what happens if we try to compare this force enclosure that we had on form closure? So the force closure is based on forces plus friction. Form closure is based on geometry only. Force closure can resist all wrenches, yes, if wrench space is spanned. Form closure can resist all wrenches, yes, due to physical entrapment. Then force enclosure uses contact forces. For form closure, you don't need contact forces. And force closure is used when you want to have real world grasp with friction. Form closure is idealized for fixture based gripping, idealized gripping in which you don't have friction and all. So for those cases we use this form closure. Form closure alone helps due to geometry, but when friction comes into play you have to check all the forces. So the other options were, so in our case the correct option is this. The first option is may or may not reject any external disturbance, any disturbances wrenches. This is too vague and incorrect for form closure, which guarantees full constraint. Then the second is reject some disturbance wrenches. This would describe partial form closure or force closure under limited friction but not full form. So no. And yeah, The other is cannot reject any arbitrary disturbance. That would be the case of unstable or no grasp. So that is also not correct. So this is your correct option. And yeah, here you can reject the disturbance due to wrenches and twists. Okay. The internal forces required for grasping an object by a multi-finger hand belongs to eigenvector space, row space, column space, null space. If you have gone through the lectures and you would listen one thing only, then you would be able to tell the answer. But yeah, let's see what happens here. Let's go to grasp matrix first. Okay. So let's say we are defining our grip matrix G. Okay. Then we want to find out what is a net wrench on an object. It is defined by grip matrix into F, right? This is your net wrench and this is your fingertip forces and moments. Okay, now if it is internal force, so we are talking about internal force, right? If F int belongs to null space of grasp or grip, then what would happen? G into F int will be equal to 0. So if the force is internal and it is belonging to the null space of, because we already know, right, that the homogeneous part of the solution actually gives you the null space, and if the internal force belongs to that null space, then this would become 0. You won't have any wrench over here, right, because it is just internal force. What does this mean? This means that these internal forces do not affect the object. They result in 0 net wrench. Okay, that's why they are called internal forces. Okay, so they are, for example, what could they be? They could be just a second, tension between fingers. Okay, then they could be force balance that keeps the object in equilibrium. But don't move it, right? So yeah, so your option is null space. The other options are wrong because the first one is eigenvector space. It is related to matrix transformation or dynamics, not relevant for static and internal forces in grasping. Then there is row space. Row space of G corresponds to linear constraints on the wrench space, not internal forces. The column space corresponds to achievable wrenches. I'll write it here. Wait. These are achievable wrenches, that is external effects. Okay. Then these are linear constraints on the wrench space. Okay, and these are not at all related to this. These are related to dynamics. So we don't have to do anything with this. Yeah. So your correct option is null space. So the very important thing that you can take away from here is external wrench is spanned by column space of G, and internal range is spanned by null space of G. Okay? If it is clear, then let's move to the next question. When an object is grasped by multi-finger hand, then the total solution of fingertip forces consists of what? Kernel of the operator, null space, inverse of grasp matrix, homogeneous solution, and particular solution. So let's see this. So we already talked about this, right? This is your net wrench. These are your fingertip forces and moments. Now, G is your grip matrix. F is the vector of all the contact forces, and W is the desired net wrench on an object. So this is a linear equation of the form AX is equal to B. Right? The general solution to this is F is equal to F particular plus F homogeneous. So what happens? F particular, the particular solution satisfies G F particular is equal to W, right? And F homogeneous belongs to null space of G, that is the internal forces that basically do not affect wrench. Okay, so this is your correct answer. Basically you need to remember this, that it has two solutions, and then one of them is related to the external forces and one of them is just related to internal forces, which does not have any impact on the object. Okay, so your the first option is kernel of the operator. So this just refers to homogeneous part. Okay, null space null space is related to internal forces only. An inverse of grasp matrix, uh, often the grasp matrix is not so, right? You take the pseudo inverse and do everything, but it does not account for internal forces, because it is anyway you're going to take the inverse and you're going to lose the things. So yeah, so the takeaway from here is the complete force is equal to F particular solution, which is corresponding to all the external forces, plus span of null set of G. So these includes both the force that generate the wrench, okay, and this is internal forces that do not affect the object. Okay, now if we yeah, this kernel operator, I hope you understand, we had this once. If you remember, kernel of A is defined by X belongs to R and such that X is equal to 0. So it is the set of all vectors X that cause no output from the operator. So in this context, GF is equal to 0 was thing. So these are basically contact force combinations that do not move the object, right? Do not apply any wrench, but they may keep fingers in tension because it is at least needed. And these are the internal forces. So as I was mentioning some time back, that to hold this object you need to have two fingers anyway. Okay, so you're not maybe applying any force, you're not contributing to any wrench in the manipulation of the object or anything, but you're just applying this because you want to hold it. Your fingers are in tension, right? But you're not applying any net wrench, you're not moving the object. That is what we get from null space. I hope it is clear. So kernel or null space is something which has set of vectors which are all mapped to 0. In grasping, it is set of internal contact forces. The geometric interpretation can be vector space or of force combinations with zero net effect on the object. That's it. Okay, I hope this is clear. If it is, then let's move to the next question. Okay, from here we have the questions on gates. We are done with grasping. And this is a very general question. I think any of you would be able to answer. So what is gate actually? Is it pattern or foot placement? Pattern of foot placement, it is style of running, it is number of foot the robot has, or it is pattern of the distribution of center of gravity during walk. What is the correct answer to this question? Can anyone tell? Very simple question this is. Please answer.
Pattern of foot placement.
Right. Pattern of foot placement. So in legged robotics and biomechanics, a gate is defined as the sequence and timing in which a robot or animal, I mean it is defined for everyone, lifts, swings, and places its feet during locomotion. Okay, so this includes which leg moves when, right? What does it include? Which leg moves when? What is the duration of swing versus stance phase? I hope you know what is swing and stance. Swing is when your foot is lifted away from the ground, when it is in air basically. Stance is when you have it on the ground. And then the other thing is when we want to know symmetry or periodicity or duty cycle. What is duty cycle? We'll see that in the next question probably. When we have the question for wave gate, then we'll see that. Okay, so the examples, what could be example of few of the gates? It can be a walk gate, it can be trot gate, it can be gallop gate, and it can be tripod gate. Apart from this, it can be bound gate, crawl gate, creep gate, etc. Okay, so walk is one foot at a time moves, trot is diagonal pairs move together, gallop is all legs lift briefly, they are in aerial phase, And tripod gait is something in which insects and hexapods move alternating leg triplets. Then these bound gaits are used for running. Basically, they are high speed gaits, and these crawl and creep are low speed gaits, and they use and there is a wave gait. Yeah, we'll see this wave gait right now. Okay, so the first option was second option was it is style of running. Gait isn't about running. It includes walking, trotting, crawling, etc. The other option was number of foot the robot has. That's leg configuration, not gait. Gait is how those legs are used. And the last option is pattern of the distribution of center of gravity during walk. That's related to stability and balance, not the formal definition of gait itself, right? So yeah, these are not correct, and your correct option is pattern of foot placement. Okay. Then okay, the next question is a quadruped is walking using a wave gait. The maximum number of legs that are in the air at any time or instance is r what? Okay, so let me tell you this. Sorry, wave gait is slowest but most stable gait. Okay, that is used by quadrupeds. In this, only one leg is lifted at a time. That one leg is lifted means what? Swing phase. Okay, the three other legs stay on the ground. So let's say this is your quadruped. Okay, this is your ground. Make some bigger quadruped. And here, so let's say these are the two legs and these are the two legs. Now let's say this leg, the front right leg is lifted as of now. All the other legs are placed on the ground. Sorry. Okay, this is one of them is lifted. Okay, so if it is lifted and the others are staying on the ground, so these three will actually form a support triangle. So if you can imagine, it is somewhat inside. It would be somewhat here. If this complete thing is a plane, then it would be here. And it would form a support triangle. Right. The thing is, the center of gravity of this robot should lie in this support triangle to keep it balanced. So if it were using two legs together, two legs in swing phase and two legs in stance phase, then the support polygon would be very small. So that increases the chance of instability. But if three legs are always on the ground, that means that your center of gravity, there is a high chance that the center of gravity is going to lie in the support polygon. Right? So you are going to keep the robot stable. Okay, so this gait prioritizes maximum static stability. Okay, so which is ideal for where would this be required, this static stability? It would be required on rough terrain, because you cannot have like a gait in which it is being balanced by two or one leg and three are on the ground or one is on the ground. No, you cannot. And then when you want to have precision movement, okay, because three legs are on the ground, there would be less chance of uncertainty. And the third thing is, when you want to have low speed locomotion, then you are bound to use these gaits. Okay, so yeah, the correct option is 1, that at any instant the maximum number of legs that are in air is 1. The first option is depends on walking speed, not true for wave gait. Wave gait is defined by always lifting one leg at a time regardless of speed. So it has nothing to do with that. Then the other option is 3. That would imply only one leg is supporting the body, like a bounding or aerial gait. So this happens, but this happens in bound gait. And it is a very high speed gait or aerial gait. It's not a wave gait. The third is 2 legs in air happens in trot gait. It is used for faster walking but not in wave gait. So what happens if you compare the speed now? Then bound gait has better speed, I mean more speed than trot than this one, wave gait, wave or crawl. Got it? It is in this way. One more thing is that hexapods, the 6-legged quadrupeds, use tripod gait. This is an interesting fact. They use this tripod gait, which means they have 3 legs in air and 3 legs on the ground. But quadrupeds use wave gait always to ensure that 3 legs remain on the ground. Okay? So yeah, they use this. Okay? I hope this question is clear. Then let's move to the next question. A passive biped robot can walk down an inclined surface using which type of energy? Is it magnetic? Is it gravity? Is it kinetic? Is it thermal? So passive dynamic walking is something we are talking about.
Gravity.
Yeah, right. Gravity is the correct answer. So, yeah, it was introduced by, I think, Ted Gear in 1990s. So it shows that a bipedal robot can walk without motors. Okay? Walk without motors mean walk without active control, purely by using gravity. When placed on a slightly downward slope. Okay, so there are no actuators needed. You might have seen the example of tuk-tuk in the lecture, right? And then the basic hopper that was shown, which had a spring. So there are no actuators needed, no energy input is there, just a clever mechanical design. You might have seen the biped as well, in which the legs were made in such a way that you have a circular curvature, so that you can always utilize the fact that when the wheel is rolling downward over an incline, then it always moves in the downward direction due to gravity. That is the same concept that is used there. It is just a biped, and it is just initialized in such a way that it follows the walking pattern and it does not topple off. Okay, so there are no actuators needed, there is no energy input, it is just a clever mechanical design, and the robot uses gravitational potential energy. It loses while descending to power its walking motion, right? So it converts that potential energy into kinetic energy in a natural rhythmic way. Basically the gravitational potential energy is being converted to kinetic energy, and this is similar to how a pendulum swings, very similar to that. That is why your gravity is the correct answer. First option is magnetic. Magnetic is not involved in passive walking at all. Kinetic is there. Kinetic energy results from motion but isn't the source of energy. So the source of energy is gravity only. And the last option is thermal. It is not related at all because no heat engine or thermodynamics is being involved here. Okay. So yeah, the examples are these Cornell's passive walkers, right? Then there are toy bipeds, which you have already seen. if they are placed on ramps. And then yeah, there are some energy efficient robots also. For example, these Boston Dynamics Atlas and Agility Robotics Digit, these are the foundation of them, which actually helps them in reducing the energy requirement. All right. So yeah, this is it about this. Now let's move to the next question. Okay. So, an active biped robot that is actuated at all joints is working in single support phase, which is one leg in air. So, the robot is a dynamically balanced system, statically balanced system, statically unbalanced system, statically balanced system, and dynamically unbalanced system. Okay. So, the main point is it is working in the single support phase. What does it mean? It stands on one leg when the other is in the air, which means this is mid strike. In this phase, basically, not a general statement. In this phase, the robot cannot rely on static stability. Okay, what is static stability? Center of mass should be inside support polygon. So you cannot rely on this, right? Like you cannot rely on this. Why you cannot rely on support polygon? There is a biped, and for the biped, one of the legs is actually in the air, and one of them is on the ground. Then what is the support polygon currently? Let's say this is the ground. This is your biped. Okay. Then yeah, it has two legs. One is on the ground, and the other is in the air. Then what is the support polygon for this? Come on, this is a very easy question. Your support polygon is just this part. This is only your support polygon. Why? Because so yeah, we said that it cannot rely on static stability. Center of mass should be inside the support polygon. So the support polygon is being formed only by the foot placements, right? But one of them is in the air. So just this one is lying on the ground, and this is your support polygon. Now, being a biped, it is not possible that your center of mass would shift and come right above this point. It's not possible. It's a 3D body. It's not 1D body where you can have center of mass above your foot. So polygon is very small, and you can have, and you won't have. I mean, you have very less, very less chance of having the center of mass directly above the support polygon. So you cannot rely on static stability because the support polygon is tiny. It is just 1 foot. So the robot must use motion, dynamic forces and torques to stay balanced. So you remember from the lecture there was an example of this pencil being kept on the ground. If it is just being kept like this, you won't be able to balance it. You have to apply some forces and torque, keep applying them to balance it here. Similar is the case of inverted pendulum. Inverted pendulum is in this position. When it goes up, it maintains this position. Okay. How does it maintain? You have to have some forces and balance. So there is a cart. This cart keeps on moving. there is acceleration, and then you have external forces acting on this pendulum to maintain it in this position. You cannot have just statically pendulum being maintained in this position. You cannot do that, right? So my point is, the support polygon is really small and your center of mass should lie there, and all of these things are there for this pipette. That is why it is maintaining a dynamic balance, because it is not falling down. If it is not falling down, it is using some forces. If it is using some forces, that means it is not static. Dynamics are coming into the picture. So the second option is the statistically unbalanced system. Statically unbalanced system is not true, because it is just describing the lack of static balance. It is not a correct category, in fact. The other is statically balanced system. Incorrect, because static balance applies when the robot is stationary with its center of mass over the support polygon, which is not the case here. So it is not happening that way. And the last one is dynamically unbalanced system. That would mean that the robot is falling over, which is not true if it is walking stably with full actuation. So your correct option is the first one only. So humanoid robots like Atlas from this Boston Dynamics are dynamically balanced during walking when they are in single support. All of them are dynamically balanced and not statically balanced. All right. So this is your correct option.
Ma'am, can we generally say that the active biped robots are dynamically balanced system?
Active biped robots. Yes, you can say.
Okay, ma'am.
Only the thing is that they're moving. They shouldn't be placed stationary. In general, they are dynamically balanced, but I assume you're talking about when they are moving. If they are just not doing anything, then it is also statically balanced.
Okay.
Kranti, can you mute yourself? Yeah, thanks. Okay, now let's move to the next question. So this is basically a MATLAB problem. So the title of the problem is that we want to analyze a 2D two-finger grasp. Okay. So the problem statement is, you're given a 2D object, let's say a box, grasped by two fingers at contact points on the opposite sides. So each contact is modeled as a point contact with friction. Okay, it is with friction. 3 plus 3, if you remember. Contact 1 is at this position, contact 2 is at this position. Both contacts are normal at the point and they are pointing inward towards the box. Assume that a friction cone can be approximate. Okay, what is a friction cone? Do you know what is a friction cone? No? Okay, I'll take it forward. So at each contact, one in the normal direction, one at 45-degree angle with the friction force. So what you're supposed to do basically is construct the grasp matrix using these wrenches and determine if the grasp can resist any external wrench. That means if it is forced closer there or not, and what is the null space of G and what does it represent. So yeah, I have the code right here. I'll show you in MATLAB also the the answer to this question, but before that, so yeah, you define the contact points in this way. Okay, these are 2D positions of the contact points. This is this, and both are on either side of the object. So if the object is like this, it is this way. Okay, then we also define the friction cone direction, which is pi by 4 here. For that, okay, so you know very well that for friction, before going through this, there is a normal force. Let's call it to be Fn. There is a tangential force, which is Ft, right? What does friction law says? The law of friction says something, that the tangential force has always to be equal to mu into normal force. Why? To avoid slipping. If this law is not followed, then you can get slipping. So this is just to avoid slipping. So if you have the forces in this friction cone, if you have the tangential force to be less than mu into normal, right, the dynamic friction, if you have it to be less than this, then it defines a cone shaped region in 3D of allowable contact forces. Any force inside this cone won't cause slipping. Okay, that is why we have this. So yeah, that is why the angle which is given is corresponding to this. And from here we can also write one more thing. We can write fx square, because it is just a tangential force, and we can bracket fx square plus fy square should be less than mu into fz. That's all. Okay, so this gives a full 3D cone of allowable force directions. So what it is used for actually, it determines in which direction, if this is object, you won't always apply force in normal direction, right? It won't be always this way. Sometimes you'll apply it to be this way also, right? And there are two things which can happen right now. You have two components of force, this one and this one. Maybe your tangential force goes more than mu into normal force, and if it does go, then the object will snap out of your finger, right? So you're not inside the friction cone, you have allowed slipping. So that is the case happening there. So you want to always stay in the friction cone so that you don't have you don't allow the object to slip. So it basically determines what is the extent of this angle that you can make with the vertical so that your object will not snap out. Now let's say you decrease the angle to this. Then also maybe if you apply a force, after some time your object shoot kar nikal jaye. If it is completely this way, it won't. If you are changing a direction, there are some chances. If it is in this direction, there are even more chances. If it is completely in tangential direction, it has to snap out, right? So yeah, just to say that we don't want slipping, we say that a friction should lie inside the friction cone. That's it. Okay, so that is why we are defining this angle. And for each contact, we need to define two force directions inside the cone. Okay, one is the normal force and one is the friction cone. Here also one is the normal force, one is the friction cone. These are the unit vectors inside the friction cone. So one is pure vertical, which is a pure normal force. The other is tilted, which includes a tangential component, and it is the allowable tangential component. Not any value can be taken. Okay. Then what we do is we convert the contact forces to wrenches. Okay. By multiplying it with this vector P1 and P2 that we had defined here. These are being converted to wrenches. After converting into wrenches, we get basically the torque of this form, position into force wala ki wajah se. Then we are constructing four wrenches. When we get the 4 wrenches, we can directly get the grip matrix. This grip matrix has columns, which are wrenches, how each force direction how each contact direction contributes to the object motion. First row is net force of x, second row is net force y, third is net torque. So this is what we get because it is a 2D, grasping in 2D. And then we check for force closure, then we check the rank of the grasp matrix. If the rank is 3, it means that the wrenches span the full 2D wrench of the space, fx, fy and f torque. So if the rank is 3, then this is, it is under force closure. Hence the grasp can resist any disturbance under force closure if it is the ideal condition. Yeah, again, if it is the practical condition, you might have a number of things happening over there. But theoretically, if it is the just an ideal condition, this would help. So from here we display that the grasp has a force closure or it does not have a force closure. Okay. Then we calculate what is the null space of G. So this null space of G are the combination of contact forces that result in zero net torque on the object, right? There is no net force on torque or torque on the object due to these internal forces, right? We have seen this already. So yeah, we try to find out what is there in null space, and these are internal tensions between the fingers, and these are not the net forces that are acting on the object. So, and this is one of the helper functions that help us calculate these products. Yeah, that's it. So we'll see this in the code in a short time. Before that, these frictions are approximated using two directions per contact. Then there is this grasp matrix which maps contact forces to net wrench on the object. Rank of G tells if the grasp has force closure. If we are able to reject any external wrenches, then the null space of G is basically dealing with the internal forces that do not move the objects, and 2D wrench is Fx, Fy and F torque. All right. So yeah, we'll see this. Wait for a few minutes because there is another problem. It is related to gate. Okay. So let's say you are given a quadruped जिसका front left है leg. So if I say this to be a quadruped, this is your front right, or they have right front. This is your left front. This is your right hind. This is your left hind. Okay. So in a wave gate, only one leg swings at a time. The others support. The gate cycles through legs in the move in the following order. पहले LH move किया, ठीक है? Then it is being transferred to move किया का क्या मतलब है? If LH is lifted at the first instant, in the second instant LF will be lifted, whereas all of them will remain on the ground. In the third case, RH will be lifted, and LF, LH and RH, all of them will stay on the ground. And the fourth case, RH will be lifted, and LH, LF and RF, all of them will stay on the ground. Okay. So each leg swing phase lasts for 0.25 seconds, which is basically your duty cycle. Duty cycle means 25/100. 1/4. That means 1 मिनट में 25 सेकंड, नॉट 25 सेकंड, 1 मिनट में 25 सेकंड नहीं, 1 मिनट में 15 सेकंड. Okay, they are talking about 1 second only. Yeah. So if you're talking about 1 second, in minute it would be 15, right? 60/4. Here it would be 1 second ka 0.25. So for 1/4 of the time, one of the legs will be lifted and others will stay on the ground. Then the other leg will be lifted and the others will stay on the ground. So my point is, you'll have one leg being lifted for 25% of the time. Okay. So yeah, full gate is 1 second. Your task is to simulate the swing and support phase for each leg over 3 cycles, that is 3 seconds, not just 1 second, and plot a timeline diagram showing each leg swing support pattern. Let me take you through the code. Before that, we want to create a footfall diagram, which we also call to be gate diagram, showing when each leg is in swing phase, when each leg is in stance phase. The diagram runs for 3 seconds, simulating a wave gate. Okay. Now, so how we do this? We define the cycle time, swing time, total time, dt for what time we want to simulate, and then we have these offsets here. Then we define what is the gate matrix, taking all of them. So it basically has 4 rows in legs into time steps, swing phase and stance phase. Then we loop through each of the legs and then we try to say, okay, this should be the gate. Okay, T cycle, T and सबका और एंड लेकर ही करते हैं, डिपेंड्स किस लेग का गेट हो रहा है. So this happens and then we plot the diagram. Yeah. Okay. Then we also plot the swing phase, which detects the rising and falling edges of swing phase, white box and all that. So you already have this code in the slide. It is just plotting the things. So yeah, I'll be taking you to MATLAB now. Just let me switch the recording window first. Just a second. I'll record the meeting right now. not showing edge. Yeah, just a second. Let me change the page. Yeah. So, recording going on correctly. Yes. Now let me change the screen. I hope my screen is visible. Now, let me take you to MATLAB. Okay. So yeah, this is the first code that we saw for GRASP. This is same code. So basically you get the GRASP matrix over here. Then we define what is the rank of GRASP matrix. You get it to be equal to 3. It is checked by MATLAB itself. So here this is the code where we try to check what is the rank of this G matrix. And then we try to find out what is the internal force basis, what is null space of G, and this is what we get. Okay. So that's all about it. And you can see from here, okay, so it is basically going to be x kya hoga if ax is equal to 0. So that's all you try to find here. Okay, then the second one which we did is this for gates. This is same code. So from here you can see. I hope the screen is visible. Let me check. Are you able to see this plot?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So just ignore till here because somehow there is some error in which this part has not been. Okay, I can shift it, I think. Yeah, we can see from here. Not from here. We'll see from 1. Okay. So our concern will be from time is equal to 1 second to 2 seconds. So you can see in the first instant, this LH is being swinging. And when this LH is in swing phase, LF, RH and RF, all of these 3 are in the stance phase. Means all of these 3 are on the ground and only the left hind leg is swinging. Now this shifts to LF. When this LF is lifted, this LH goes back to stance phase and RH and RF continue to be there in the stance phase. The next is RH. When this is swinging, the other 3 are in the stance phase, and when RF is swinging, the other 3 are in the stance phase, right? So we wanted to go from LH to LF to RH to RF. So it is happening that way. Now consider this time interval 0, 1 to 2 seconds. Each leg is swinging once in this 1 second interval. It is from 1 second to 2 seconds. So it is just 1 second interval, and 25% of the time each of the legs are swinging. 75% of the time all of them are on the ground. Now at each point of time you will find that just one leg is swinging and the other things are in stance phase. At no point of time you will find that all of these 4 are in the swing phase or are in the stance phase. So the duty ratio here is 0.25, which means 25% of the time one of the legs is surely going to be in swing phase and the other 3 are going to be in stance phase. Now after this 2 seconds, again it repeats. The same thing actually repeats with the same periodicity. So periodicity is actually of in time it is 1 second. I hope this is clear. Any confusion with this? So this is a gate diagram that you can always draw. It's just that you have to define that how the wave gate is defined. You don't have a function to say that, yeah, this is a wave gate, and then you want to find out what it is. No, you have to define that it is 25% of the time this is going to happen and this is not going to happen, and then you can always plot it. So this is the way the figure is generated over here. And yeah, you can do this for the other gates also, the bound gate, the trot gate. So in this case, you see, uh, it is a very, I mean, when the LH is going to stance phase, then only LF is going to swing phase. There are other gates in which we have scenario like LH is still in swing phase, whereas LF goes to swing phase. I mean, there is just a phase difference. Got it? It is not completely 0 या 1 करना है at any point of time. It is like, okay, one leg has gone in the air, the other leg does not need to wait when it comes on the ground and then the other goes. No, it can be just separated by a phase difference. So that is also possible, and it happens in all of the faster gates. So trot gate and bound gate actually use this. Okay, so yeah, this is also one of the possible situations. If there is any doubt, let me know on today's class.
Thank you, ma'am.
Do you want to say something, Kranti?
No, 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 no.
Okay. Yeah, and just a reminder that the next session will be on the same time, this 6 to 8 only. So it would be the last session the next Monday on 14th. There is an extra session that I am going to take. So it would be right before this session. So what I would ideally do is, the week 12 session I'll be taking from 5 to 7, and 7 to 8 I'll be conducting an extra session. So it is like 3 hours session. So please be there on Monday as well. Just reminder, you'll get a mail as well that it is going to be at 5 o'clock. But yeah, I'll be taking from 5 to 7 one of the sessions, week 12 session, and 7 to 8 would be the extra session. So yeah, it is just a gentle reminder. Okay then, thanks. See you next Monday.
Okay.
Yeah.